System Shock is a difficult game to analyze due to its importance in the industry and how much it inspired games that came later. But I think that if I explain what the remake is like, you will understand the impact of the original from that point forward. The game begins with Hacker, our protagonist, infiltrating the internal network of a company called Trioptimal. Soldiers from the corporation raid his apartment and Hacker is taken to a space station orbiting Saturn. It was the 90s, video games didn't need much explanation. Hacker wakes up 6 months later on this station after a surgical procedure to enhance his body with cybernetic implants. In the first room, you acquire the first weapon, a broken pipe, and also receive a message from Earth warning that this station is experiencing a biological outbreak and that this station's planet mining laser is targeting Earth. From there, the game simply throws you into this enormous place overrun by mutants, killer cyborgs, and an artificial intelligence named Shodan that has become self-aware and now controls the entire station.
Welcome back to Citadel Station. We hope you have a pleasant stay.
The first thing you encounter in System Shock is the interface. There is a dedicated button to interact with the elements on the screen, enabling the hacker's implants, moving objects in the inventory tab, checking audio logs and messages, and looking at the map are some of these interactions. You can pick up almost everything in the environment and place it in an inventory grid with limited space that you constantly need to manage and keep organized, even useless items like trays, cups, and empty biohazard bags. These seemingly useless objects can be vaporized and turned into scrap, which can be exchanged for credits at recycling stations. It may seem a bit silly, but this allows even locations with only these mundane objects to earn you some extra money if you have the patience. It's a way to reward player exploration, which is one of the most important aspects of the game. This emphasis on exploration becomes apparent in the next room, where we encounter a locked door with a code. You need to search the room after facing some robots. In a small room at the back, you find a text log informing you that the code for the medical room door has changed. It is upon opening that door that we face the first mutant, and the entire floor opens up to the player. Exploring the medical floor, the first floor of the station, you quickly realize how interconnected and expansive this place is. One door leads to a room that contains an exit, which takes you to a corridor connecting to another room that ultimately leads you back to the beginning of the floor. It's also labyrinthine that it's very easy to get lost at first, but soon you start recognizing each of the corridors, and as the game encourages more cautious and thorough exploration, these walls start seeping into your cortex, and everything begins to make sense. Having a map that updates in real time also helps a lot. But the feeling of being lost, of finding yourself in a place where you don't belong, never goes away. There is no list of objectives in the game, so it's easy to get lost if you don't pay close attention to the station's audio logs and information. From the first message of the game, you understand that you need to shut down or redirect the planet mining laser that will destroy Earth, and that someone on the second floor, the research floor, may have the answer to that. But how to reach that floor and where to find that laser control? You can only discover that by exploring. The entire game is like this, and the entire station is interconnected. Each floor has a function that impacts the other floors, and as you gain access to these new areas, the old ones are never blocked. So with each new floor, the station grows and grows and grows until it becomes a giant monster with multiple tentacles called Shodan.
They infest my body, my mind, like insects. They will be treated as such.
Shodan is one of the most iconic villains in video games. She's present throughout the entire game. Everything you do involves some plan of hers. The planet mining laser aimed at Earth is her plan. The biological outbreak on the station is her plan. And whenever you throw out one of these plans, you discover that there are 3 more in progress, turning everything into a race against time and this malevolent force with a god complex.
Cease your pestering, insect. Accept the coming of your new god.
Destroying security cameras is a way to remove her eyes, reducing the floor security level and unlocking new paths. You are inside Shodan. She is the station. So when she calls you an insect, it's not just a cheap insult. You really are just a crawling insect at her feet. This concept is present in both the narrative and the level design. Everything you do is connected through these floors and is part of Shodan's plans. For example, you can't reach the engineering floor because the station's control warns of a major biological hazard on the executive floor, where you currently are. So you need to discover through audio logs and other documents what happens and how to solve the problem. It's worth emphasizing that you can stumble upon this information by chance, just by exploring. On the executive floor, there are domes with green areas where the station's inhabitants could spend time and relax. Upon reaching one of these domes, you realize that the air is contaminated with a biological hazard. Now it makes sense, right? To rid the station of the infection, you need to eject that dome. But to enter that dome, you need the biohazard protection suit, which you find on the storage floor, and you can only reach the storage by going through the maintenance area, which you can only access by passing through the research floor and so on, always solving problems and trying to thwart Shodan's plans along the way. There is no perception of separate levels, the station is one entity. The more you explore and become familiar with it, the more its structure starts to make sense. Items you pick up at the beginning of the game start to have a logical purpose later on. Yes, even a severed head. And even if you drop that item in some random place on the station because you didn't have space in your inventory, you can always retrieve those items. The entire station is available to the player even when you are already exploring the uppermost floors. You might struggle a bit if you left an item in a particular difficult to find location, but in that case, you only have yourself to blame. This is just one example, but each floor presents you with some kind of obstacle that leads you to search for a plausible solution, usually guided by audio logs. This allows you to become better acquainted with the station, its environments and mechanisms, as well as getting to know the inhabitants and how they lived and worked in this place. All of this under the watchful eye of Shodan.
I see you are still alive, insect.
Preventing you from freely advancing through the station are some circuit puzzles that open doors or other passages scattered throughout the map, as well as the cyberspace. Very 90s, right? It turns the game into a spaceship minigame where you have to navigate this virtual environment, defeat some station security protocols and find the access points that you need to hack in order to unlock passages in the station, some of which are optional, like weapon depots and other routes. This minigame is the weakest point of the game. Navigating in cyberspace is not as responsive, and facing the same enemies over and over again until you reach the end of these colorless and repetitive maps becomes a tedious task. Fortunately, they are short and not too frequent. But not only puzzles and cyberspace are in your way, Shodan's minions also try to prevent you from exploring the station in peace. Throughout the floors, you encounter a wide variety of enemies, mutants behaving like zombies, cyborgs with pistols, giant robots with machine guns, and much more. To face them, you have a vast arsenal at your disposal, including pistols, laser weapons, rifles, shotguns, and even lightsabers. Almost all the weapons have some kind of alternative mode, either in terms of ammunition type or the power of the laser beam. The combat in System Shock is not as exceptional as its world structure, but it is competent enough. The AI of the enemies is quite simple. Most of them shoot at you if you are in their line of sight and run toward you if you are no longer in their line of sight. However, since the entire station is basically a series of tight corridors, this behavior is enough to bring a fun challenge, and with a wide variety of enemies, each with its own type of attack and weaknesses, you always need to be aware of which weapon to use and when to use them. This makes combats dynamic and appropriately challenging. Hacker also has implants, which are basically enhancements or elements of the interface itself. There is the navigation unit, which displays the real-time updated minimap, a flashlight, the environmental protection suit, and turbo movement boots that allow you to jump higher and run faster. These abilities open up many paths in the station, granting you access to previously unreachable places and discovering alternative routes to catch enemies off guard. There are other implants that it's better for you to discover during your visit to the station. If any of these features of System Shock sound like something you don't enjoy in video games, know that the game offers a variety of difficulty options. There are 4 different categories, each with 3 levels. The first one is Combat, which changes the number of enemies, their health and how aggressive they are. The second is Mission, where the easiest mode provides objective markers on the map and prevents you from leaving important items behind, while the highest mission difficulty gives you only 5 hours to complete the game. The third option is Cyberspace, which adjusts the difficulty of enemies in this cyberspace. In the hardest setting, if you die in the virtual environment, you also die in the game. And finally, there is the Puzzle difficulty. I played with all of them on option 2, the normal difficulty, which seems to be the developer's preference. After all, I don't see any possibility of finishing the game in less than 5 hours if you've never played before, considering that it took me around 30 hours. Even if you are fast, this time limitation will certainly spoil your first experience with the game. The System Shock Remake is a very special game and has already become one of my favorite games of 2023, especially because of its atmosphere and interconnected level design, which left me fascinated. But what impacted me the most after finishing this game was discovering that the remake is extremely faithful to the original 1994 version. I had never had the chance to play the original, and after completing the remake, I decided to spend a few hours with the first version of the station. It's impossible not to be impressed by this game. An interconnected map that encourages player creativity when facing problems, the first game to have audio logs, and Metroidvania systems before the term Metroidvania even existed. To give you an idea, Super Metroid was released only 6 months prior. System Shock is a game ahead of its time, and it's no wonder that it influenced an entire generation of developers. The legendary immersive sim Deus Ex from System Shock producer Warren Spector was one of the games that expanded the formula of the original and solidified the genre, along with Thief. Games like Dead Space and the Ishimura Mining Station, BioShock, the spiritual successor to System Shock, carry many elements from the original, such as the checkpoint system and the structure of Rapture, Alien Isolation with its station but also with creative ways to escape enemies and the alien, Prey, which many consider as System Shock 3, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, Dishonored, Observer, Soma, Portal. The list could go on for a long time. The truth is that the video game industry today would be very different if System Shock hadn't existed, and the remake being such a great game in 2023 while remaining so faithful to the original is proof of how ahead of its time the original was. With the main interface issues resolved, updated controls and beautiful visuals, System Shock has never been more accessible. The remake is a way to go back in time and experience one of the most important works in the industry without having to overcome the initial barriers that keep so many people away from the original. A true homage to the past, developed by Night Dive, a team of fans of the original, along with former Looking Glass Studios developers, the care and dedication to every little detail of the remake are evident, with each corridor replicated with precision, while also adding new elements and environments to enrich the original experience. System Shock Remake is the updated vision of a timeless masterpiece, a work that, even without significant changes, is one of the best games of 2023, almost 30 years after its original release. Only a few games can be placed in the pantheon of the most important games in history, and System Shock is certainly one of them.